Welcome to the Finance and Tech podcast. I'm your host and Chief Finance Techie, Simon Ritchie. This is the show where we dive into all things technology for finance teams. I interview other finance techies, finance leaders, and industry legends who share their stories, strategies, and insights to help build and grow your career in finance. In this podcast, we're joined by Johnny Bray, the CFO at Vistair Systems, based in Bristol in England. Vistair is an ambitious tech business that is growing fast. Johnny started at Vistair as commercial finance manager, then became head of finance, and is now the CFO. He has a diverse skill set and experience that extends beyond the traditional finance focus. He's responsible for HR, legal, and even facilities. The early part of his career was spent at Grant Thornton as an audit manager, gaining valuable experience auditing a diverse set of businesses. Interesting fact, in 2016, Johnny was recognized as one of Accountancy Age's young professionals, being named among the top 35 under 35. He also serves as a director of a community land trust, contributing to development of affordable houses in his area, South Devon in the UK. He shares some fabulous stories in this episode of his life and experience in finance, starting out in audit and loving it. I didn't think it was possible to love a role in audit, but there you go, that's just me. He talks about what the role of CFO is like. He debunks the myths and shares why he loves the role. He encourages finance people to think more widely, not just focus on the finance, the numbers, but really get into the head of your stakeholders, deeply understand them, whether they're internal or external. We had a really good chat about tech and his belief that tech is a great investment in actually investing in your people. You free them up so they're more productive, and that allows them to work on more strategic activities, which is much better value for the business. So here it is. Stay tuned to gain insight into the multifaceted career of a CFO. I hope you enjoy. So, hey, Johnny, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you very much for having me, Simon. Looking forward to it.
Yes. So why don't we start? Could you just give us a quick overview of your background and your journey to your current role?
Yeah. So I grew up in the UK and the Middle East. Sort of grew up in the world of defence. My dad worked for BAE Systems, and then came back to the UK. Studied a degree in physics, and I didn't know what to do with myself. So I found an international business master's, thinking I didn't want to be a teacher or a research physicist, and discovered this whole thing of finance. So that's sort of where my finance career started out. I started at Grant Thornton in the audit practice there, sort of the traditional audit path that people go through. I'm quite unusual in that I actually quite enjoyed audit. So I always thought it was really interesting poking around in other people's businesses, and that's a great learning experience for people. You learn what works and what doesn't work in businesses, where things go wrong, and you've always got the finance lens on it. So how badly and how big the impact can be when things do go wrong. Yeah. I had some fascinating clients at GT. Had a great time in audit. But I started to see other opportunities elsewhere. So I did some time in some of the advisory functions within Grant Thornton. I did an experiment for Grant Thornton where we trialed being an audit manager, as I was at the time, and taking on advisory work in transaction services, so working on M&A deals, diligence side of things. Very quickly, that became apparent that can work fine until two deadlines hit at the same time, and then it's not even like it's a difficult workload; it's just not possible. So I proved something was not possible. Which is, good bit of evidence. But kind of in doing these kind of roles, a number of opportunities came out. I heard about an opportunity with Vistair, where I am now, to join what was a very small finance team at the time. So I joined as a commercial finance manager. Vistair was at that time starting to professionalize, and pretty quickly my job became not very much finance, a little bit of finance on the side, but doing all sorts of stuff. It is a small business. In small businesses, people wear many hats. I wore lots of hats in sales, in account management, in sort of IT and IT security and things like that. And then kind of that continued, and then kind of as people changed roles and succession came into play with Vistair, I stepped up to CFO about 18 months, coming up to 2 years ago. Amazing. And here I am today.
Yes, excellent. So I'd love, we talked a little bit about it pre-show. I'd love to hear a little bit about Vistair itself. You're on an exciting journey, already in the UK, US. You just recently launched in Australia, and you're sitting in the swanky, newly redesigned office, which looks amazing. Yeah. So
So Vistair, we're a tech company, technology. At the moment we're 170 staff. Around 6 years when I joined, we were just over 100, and a lot of that growth has come in the last year. So we provide technology for aviation. It sounds extremely unsexy. It's documentation, and that's kind of one side of things, is information out to people in an airline. Now, why that's actually interesting is because you imagine an airline, there are hundreds of thousands of people, and the information that people in those organizations need is really complex and really, really big. The manual to maintain the aircraft, the basic user manual, is a library's worth of books if you print it out. Nowadays, it's a big data set. It's not actually printed out. And that library, along with all the other libraries that go with every aircraft, need to get to people who might be in Zanzibar or Timbuktu, and they don't have a very good internet connection out there. So what the technology does is it takes these huge data sets and finds the relevant bits for people really, really quickly, extracts those bits, and just sends the kind of the relevant bit for people to use in situ in difficult places to hundreds of thousands of people in the world in a highly, highly regulated environment where any one mistake might be taken by an air accident investigator one day. 10 years later to find out exactly what that person was referring to and how they got that information. So it's a lot more complex than unsexy documentation sounds. And then we've got another arm of the business. So those hundreds of thousands of people around the world, they see what's going on. They work for their airline, and they might spot hazards around a runway somewhere. Could see something dangerous, right down to I keep spilling coffee on my passenger as cabin crew. There's something going wrong here. I might want to change my procedure. So we're quite unusual in the industry. There's loads of data in aviation. Most of it comes from technology. It comes from systems. It comes from the aircraft. It comes from the system of the aircraft.
Yeah.
There's very little information from human beings. Right. So what we do is we gather the information from human beings and turn that into data sets, and then provide that back to the airline head offices where they investigate safety and investigate risk and spend their time making sure that planes don't drop out of the sky. Aviation's it's a really cool industry. It's really complex. It's all over the place. There are so many moving parts. It's absolutely fascinating. And we do one tiny little bit of it, but we get to see so much of it, and it's a great fun thing to be able to be involved in.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, just from that description, what you said actually sounds really interesting to me. I've got tons of questions, but probably way more than we have time for now. Just a quick kind of fun question. If you could interview anyone, past or present, who would it be and why? What would you ask them?
Okay. So I said earlier I studied a degree in physics.
Yeah.
So I'd say it would be Richard Feynman, which lots of people won't have heard of. So Richard Feynman was a physicist, a US physicist. I think he was sort of working in the 60s, that sort of peak of his career. And he worked in sort of the forefront of theoretical physics at the time, really fascinating stuff. But he was a total joker. And he traveled the world being a superb lecturer and taking the piss out of people in the industry and all sorts of other industries. He's got a great autobiography, well worth reading for everyone. It's not just about physics, it's about a man's journey around the world taking the piss out of people, but being an extremely well-respected intellect in his domain. So yeah, he's great fun. More people should learn about Richard Feynman.
Okay, very good. I shall put that on my reading list. Thank you. So let's jump in. What I wanted to talk about today was about your journey to CFO. What made you decide? So you said you started in audit, you quite enjoyed it, fantastic. What made you decide actually you're going to kind of push ahead, try and climb ladders, and sort of head towards CFO as opposed to staying in, one of a more specialized role in the finance team? What did that process look like for you?
So, funnily enough, I sort of decided once upon a time to say, well, I might as well come up with a goal for myself. So let that be it. So I had, this is going back to Grant Thornton days, and they have a very good mentoring program. So kind of where I got to, I had a mentor, and it kind of, Grant Thornton wants people to progress in their careers and explore where they might go and learn and start sort of setting directions for themselves. Yeah. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I never really have known what I wanted to do. I sat down with my mentor and we kind of talked about this kind of thing, careers and things like that, and said, well, why don't you set a target? Why do I need a target? I quite enjoy doing things well and running with them and getting better at them and doing things. But I said, well, try it out, see what happens. So, okay, fine, right. Well, what's my target going to be? That sounds good. Yeah, CFO sounds good. Let's make that the target, and then I'm working towards something and starting to make proactive choices about myself. That was actually a really good bit of mentoring. I'd say I'm not typical finance and certainly not typical accountant. I've got wide interests, I suppose I'd say. So, and I like getting involved in all sorts of other things outside of my space. So this setting myself this target, and it didn't matter if I didn't hit the target because at the time I didn't really care about it that much. But that helped me make choices in what I was doing that kind of guided me gradually down a great meandering route in this sort of direction. So why did I choose to be a CFO? I had to think of something. But it actually, it's been a good target for me. It fits my skill set. It fits my interests. I still get to do all sorts of stuff outside of my lane. And I think that's, the advantage of a company that's the size we are. We're bigger than we were when I started, but we are still we're probably a medium enterprise these days rather than a small end of the SME. But I still get to do much broader stuff, which is far more interesting than just the day-to-day finance job.
Yeah, amazing. For anyone sort of quite early in their career, how would you describe the main duties of a CFO typically? Like what does that look like?
So I would say that I almost have no duties. I have lots of stakeholders, and I'm probably responsible for keeping the business as a whole aware of risk and being an enabler of good ideas. So in terms of duties, yes, I have legal obligations to do certain things by company law. I've got things that are in my job title that I do day to day, but that's not really how I'd describe my role. I'd describe my role as saying, actually, okay, we work very closely as a board, working on our strategy. What is the business doing? I've got my finance hat view of that, but it's much more important that I have a far more holistic view of that, of what the strategy is, and strong views on certain areas. And like a great, relatively recent example, which has more recently kind of been one of our success stories, is we were historically very good at Vistair at working in the flight operations, like pilots and cabin crew parts of an airline.
Yeah.
The engineering operations, maintenance technicians, I sort of had a gut feel this was a good area to do more software development work into, so we could kind of expand into that part of airlines. And the reason I have that gut feel is that I've always understood organizations, and this is where the finance hat comes in. You look at an airline as an organization, and basically the airline has three massive budgets: fuel, but we can't do anything about that in our domain.
Yeah.
Salaries, and parts and stuff that goes on the airline. And if you split the salaries bill and the parts bill is about the same, very, very simplistically. And flight ops pays all of their money into salaries, and engineering pays all of their money into parts and stuff they buy. So the gut feel was that, well, engineers are going to be good at buying parts. They're going to have big budgets for parts. That fits more with buying technology. Whereas flight ops, they're good at buying people, or recruiting people and hiring, paying salaries. They're not actually, and this was always our experience, they're not that good at buying systems. So there's kind of a finance view, an organizational view of how an airline works, how our customer works, led us to explore the engineering department as a strategy. And at the same time, the sales team was sort of hearing similar things about need, and the technology kind of team was saying, well, we know there's these things we could be doing that could work really well for those groups in the airline. So we've got a whole load of people with different perspectives on the same thing going, actually, this looks like a lot of sense. Let's pursue that. And that's been a big success story. So I guess I've got a finance spin on strategy, and that's really important, but it's much more than just finance.
Yeah.
Then I've got risk. And for us, cybersecurity, massive, massive risk, massive concern. We hold defense data, so it's kind of elevated. And you hear quite a lot about airlines in the news, about data breaches and stuff like that. So airlines are extremely sensitive to it anyway. So there's an example of a risk that I own. It's my job to make sure that we're thinking about that, again, holistically. We've got technology team, we've got security, we've got sort of certifications that help us do that, but I've got to think about it a level up.
Yeah.
And then kind of finally, the kind of enablement point is, okay, we've got a business strategy. We want to do something. Let's say we want to go into engineering. What are we going to do about it? How are we going to finance that? And that's where it comes kind of back to stakeholders again. I have a budget. We might make a choice mid-budget year that we want to go and do something. So I've got investors that I've got to keep happy. I've got a technology team who might need to do some development, might need some investment in order to deliver that. So I've got to kind of bring all those stakeholders together and help everyone align in order that we can then finance the investment to go and achieve this ultimately return on investment.
Amazing. And how does so that's fantastic in terms of being exposed and really being involved in the strategic conversation, which I think I've met a single finance person who doesn't want that as well. But along there are duties across the team, and maybe you delegate them. So it's about keeping the books, being the making sure that data's cleaned up and
So and then that's absolutely if you kind of think of the more vanilla responsibilities, I guess the traditional finance role. Ultimately, I do sign our accounts. I do need to make sure that people aren't walking away with our money who aren't supposed to be. So financial control, kind of efficiency of how we do systems and technology in order that we make the most use of our teams and their really precious, really valuable time, more than just finance across the entire business. And we've got, as you said earlier, because we talked about it before. So we're in a new old office. So we've been in this building for quite a long time, but we had a great big flood earlier this year due to a single leaky tap. I know facilities that fits under my responsibility. Sometimes I've got to be a construction project manager and I've got to learn all about the construction industry and the building ways of doing things in buildings and even to like electricity grid, because it turned out this building did not have enough power for what we were already doing with it, let alone what we planned to do with it as part of the refurbishment. So those kind of more traditional responsibilities all very much fit in my remit. A company our size, HR fits under me as well. Bigger companies, that will tend to sort of separate out. Facilities might, if it were a big thing in industries. Today, our size, that they all fall to me.
So, Johnny, what would you say are some of the misconceptions of being a CFO that you can either confirm or deny or debunk now that you've been in the role for a couple of years?
Okay, misconceptions. I think one of the misconceptions is that it's all about finance. Because finance, that's a part of it. I know accounting is a part of it, but that's not what you are expected to bring to the role. You're expected to bring more strategic views and understanding of risk and understanding of organizations to the role. Finance is almost a side piece of how I see the CFO's role. Something not to be abandoned, but that's not what it's there for.
Sure. Okay. And on that, actually, what would you recommend to somebody who is in a finance role and wants to be a CFO? How do you learn those skills, or what would you recommend to learn now so that they're ready when they get there?
So start thinking more widely. Don't think about the finance function. What does your organization that you work in, or the kind of organizations that you're interested in, what do they actually do? How do they work? What goes well? What doesn't go well? And start thinking in those terms. And if you've got a day job in finance, you've got to apply what you know about that business to that day job and put your finance lens on it. But ultimately, finance is a support function. So what is that day job doing? What are you doing to enable the growth of the business, or the kind of progress of the business as a whole, rather than finance being what it's all about? I think another big thing is understand stakeholders, because yes, you're a support function, but you're almost the only support function that touches literally everything in the entire business, and that means you've got a lot of stakeholders, and they've all got an interest in being served by you, but also supported by you, and there's a lot of people to manage who have different views of the world.
Okay, fantastic. And when we were chatting, you told me you're actually in a PE-backed company. It's ambitious. So I was actually curious, what's that like being a CFO in PE-backed? Is it what we all expect? In super high pressure, they're on you on every detail. What does that look like for you?
So that's the reputation. I don't think it's really like that. I'd say we've got a super PE backer. They're very, they've got a good long-term view of the world. And there's different flavors of PE as well. There are absolutely those PE houses who are in there to strip assets and
merge really, really quickly whole groups and in order to cut overheads and therefore run away 3 years later, having cut overheads, made a business look good on paper, but actually no better and possibly worse. We've got our investors a PE house that wants to grow the business in the right way for the right reasons. So I'm lucky in that way. I'd say we're also very, very transparent. If something's not quite working how we'd expected it, or actually we underestimated how much something was going to cost, then we're out there, we're upfront straight away. All the financial data, we make it available as much as possible, and we'll work with them in order to achieve what ultimately is in all of our interests. It's the same goal. PE wants to grow the business, ultimately to sell their stake. And actually we want to grow our business. So we've got the same objective in mind. If we're transparent and open about what's working, what's not, everyone wants to solve the things that are not working. So our interests are aligned. I think transparency makes that a lot easier. So I would say I feel pressure in that I have a whole load of stakeholders to manage who have very particular interests and objectives, but it's not that kind of notorious fantasy PE where they're just like on your back asking for data constantly.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not, that's sounds fantastic. And then let's just quickly talk team. So as the CFO, what does your team look like, and how have you structured your team to make sure you've got a really high performing finance and it sounds like you've got broader responsibilities.
So I think I've got a great team. So I've got a very, very small team, very lean team. So we've got I've got 2 chartered accountants in the team, one who's full time, one who's part time. I've got a finance administrator who does the bookkeeping. She's more than just data entry. She's got lots of knowledge about things like payroll and VAT and kind of how to get things right the first time. Actually, if there's something unusual or difficult, let's kind of raise it and let's get it right first time every time. And then I've got a part-time contractor who he kind of manages his own time, but basically he makes sure all of our management accounts are sort of accurate and give us the information that we are looking for. Helps make sure that the kind of bookkeeping stuff, accruals, prepayments, deferred revenue is a big thing in the kind of tech industry. All of that just happens smoothly. So again, he's part-time, and that's it. So I'd say what's the great strengths of my team? They're really, really versatile, and they do that thing I was talking about earlier, where they understand the broader business. And so you'd almost describe the 2 ACAs in my team as super business partners. I know they're actually kind of like legal counsel to our business. And I've been, one of the things I've really wanted them to do, and they've done a great job, is actually learning contract legal stuff, which ultimately is not hard. It's the English language. Can you read the English language? Does it say, can you write the English language? Does it say what you're trying to achieve? That's really valuable for the rest of the business, because we can do that in-house with a couple of people. We have external legal counsel, but we draw on them only for more difficult legal areas. They're heavily involved in pricing and commercial negotiation with customers, in business choices. When we adopt technology, helping the business understand the financial implications. So they've definitely got a broader skill set than the finance, pure finance function, and the business as a whole benefits from that massively so.
Amazing. Let's talk tech a bit. So what sort of tech is top of mind for you at the moment? what tech do you use to run the business to make you and your team more productive, and then top of mind if you think about where to improve?
Yeah, so to kind of by way of context, we're scaling, we're growing quite quickly. We're going more complicated. So we very briefly talked about it earlier. We're opening up in Australia. We've got a relatively new third product line, which kind of we're working hard to expand. We've got presence in the US, which we're kind of gradually growing as well. So very quickly, the business itself is becoming more complicated. I'd rather not hire a whole load of people to duplicate what we do today. I'd rather use technology to allow the great people I've got to spend less time doing the boring, low-value stuff. Let's find bits of technology that can do it for us, and then they can spend time doing the interesting stuff, the fun stuff for them. But also high value stuff for the business using the team's great skills. Kind of we've been exploring technology quite a lot recently. So things like everyone knows banking systems are pretty painful and a bit rubbish. So we're looking at systems which help integrate our accounting system with our banking better. We're looking at we have lots of vendors, so software vendors that we use. We work closely with our IT infrastructure team to manage that, and it's kind of their responsibility to keep track of all the vendors and make sure licenses don't fall out by accident. But we've got to work really closely with them to understand that. That kind of stuff is really manual. It takes up a lot of time. So vendor management is high on the agenda. How can we automate that or make that easier, use up less time? I kind of taken some advice, informal advice from, I guess, friends of the company and people we know about systems in general, and a scaling business like us does evolve and does adopt technology. I think really, really good top tip is start with the customer. And the technology and the system that is customer facing is for most businesses is the CRM, customer relationship management system. So as our thinking evolves, really we're looking and going, actually, that we have some technologies which work really well for our business today. We've adopted some really scalable technologies in certain areas, but we haven't done that across the business. So we're kind of starting to think, actually, maybe this is the time to do a full revisit of our CRM, kind of review if that's the right technology, use our CRM to drive financial data, because good CRMs can do that, to manage our contracts, to drive revenue recognition. And then that comes into, okay, what is our accounting system? I don't like the term ERP. Certainly for ours, it's an accounting system. ERP is the language. So have we got the right ERP? And today we've got a small company ERP which we do stuff around using the wonderful Excel and other tools to help make efficient use of a small company accounting system ERP. Our thinking is pretty much kind of going towards the direction. Actually, now is the time to look at big company ERPs and make the choices. While we're not so big, it's too late.
Fantastic.
So loads going on, and one of the challenges I think I've realised, we've got to bite off the right chunks, not do everything at the same time. What are the most important things? Start with those, and CRM is looking like the starting point. ERP, accounting system, is probably next, and then all the stuff that goes around that, the vendor management, the banking, all of that kind of stuff will depend on us making the right choices in both selecting an ERP and CRM, but implementing them in a way that supports the business and reflects what we need, what we know we're going to need in the future. So loads of thought, high on the agenda at the moment.
Yes, fantastic. And what about topic I'm really passionate about is a lot of the strategic modeling that you're doing as a CFO, things like planning, modeling,
Yeah.
etc. Have you got any go-to tools or tips in that space?
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I get that. That's a huge part of this kind of this ERP selection and systems around it, selection choices that we need to make. So we want to go data. We want to be a truly data-based financial part of our business and the business as a whole. Today we use Excel, and as a group we're quite good at Excel. The sort of FP&A, financial planning and analysis that we do. It's inherently manual because it is Excel. You can't deny that. But we've got some pretty good automation that we've built ourselves just with the kind of the power of Excel. So we can do a lot, and we've got a really good model that's versatile enough that it's not painful, but it's not true data management. This is part of the big discussions. How do we turn our business into a data-driven business where you can cut and recut data and understand movements and things that are going on from visually and from a data point of view, rather than delving deep into the once we know that, and once we've kind of established that, then longer-term planning, financial planning, and analysis can be on the same basis. And we won't be so reliant on Excel, but we'll always rely on Excel. It's an absolutely brilliant tool.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Let's just jump in. Last bit is just some quick fire questions, just to end, just to get through a few topics. If we ask your team, what is your favorite phrase that you repeat again and again, what would they tell us?
I'd say it's what's the most important thing, and what can you drop? And drop that, do that later. Focus on the big hairy chunky audacious goal and achieve that.
What's your favorite chart or way to visualize data, and why?
A bridge chart is the favorite chart of everyone around me, stakeholders, or at least financially literate stakeholders. I didn't answer your question intentionally because that's so it's probably the most useful chart. I love a coloured stacked column chart. I think it gives you way more information in one place. And I think those of us in finance, we can digest a lot of information, like all chunked into one place. Not everyone can. So the bridge chart is or sometimes called waterfall, is what I use most.
Last thing, Johnny, thanks so much for coming on the show today. If people want to reach out, where can they find you?
LinkedIn, is the social media of choice. I'm not very good at the other one.
Fantastic. All right. Well, great. Thanks for coming on. And it was really great to hear about your journey today.
Simon, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. It's great to meet you. And good luck with Block as well.
Thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely. All the best. All right.
Cheers then. Bye-bye.